President Dershowitz dismissed her live on national television. He called her a politician who preferred performance over real lawyering. And in front of hundreds of viewers under the bright stage lights and rolling cameras, he delivered a line he'd never had to walk back in his entire career. He said she had never argued a case that actually mattered. But within minutes, everything changed. The energy in the room shifted. It grew heavier. And Alan Dershowitz, the same man who once advised presidents and stood before the Supreme Court, went completely silent. Not because someone cut him off, but because there was nothing left for him to say. This wasn't a trial. It was a public debate at Emory University in Atlanta, under the banner Law and Democracy in the 21st Century. Alan was the keynote speaker. People expected him to talk about legal ethics, about the role of intellect in politics, about the legacy he hoped to leave behind. Instead, he chose a target. Seated across from him on stage was Jasmine Crockett, a black woman from Dallas, Texas, former civil rights attorney, now a sitting member of the U.S. House of Representatives. And most importantly, she didn't come from Harvard. Alan assumed that was enough to put her beneath him. He was used to being listened to, not questioned. But this time, things were different. Jasmine didn't come to debate. She came to deliver the truth. In her hands was a plain briefcase. Inside were no slogans, no empty promises, just case law, legal precedent, and victories. Victories on behalf of clients who couldn't afford celebrity lawyers. Victories that changed how justice is delivered in America every single day. And when Alan delivered that line right there in front of the crowd, she quietly opened the case, looked him straight in the eyes, calm, unshaken, and then she began to speak. What happened next didn't just bring the entire room to its feet. It made the legal profession stop and take a long look at itself. You're about to witness one of the sharpest, most precise intellectual takedowns ever caught on camera. And no, this isn't a fable. This is real. Every word, every fact, every receipt. The only question is, are you ready to see what happens when arrogance meets preparation? The moderator posed the question, calmly, but directly. Professor Dershowitz, you've been critical of politicians with law degrees who don't practice. Do you believe having practiced law actually makes someone a better legislator? Alan adjusted his glasses with practiced ease, tilting his head slightly, like he was about to lecture a room full of first-year Harvard students. He smiled. We have to make a distinction, he said. There are lawyers who enter politics, and then there are politicians who happen to graduate from law school. And let's be honest, not everyone with a law degree knows how to practice law. The room went quiet. It continued. Some people enjoy being in front of a camera making emotional appeals during hearings. But testifying in Congress isn't the same as litigating in federal court. One is law. The other is performance. The word performance landed in the air like a slap. The moderator glanced over to Jasmine Crockett. She didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt. She didn't roll her eyes. She simply tilted her head slightly, eyes fixed on Alan, as if waiting not to react but to listen. The moderator pressed on. Professor, with respect, before joining Congress, Representative Crockett spent years as a civil rights attorney. Are you familiar with any of the cases she's handled? Alan waved the question away with a flick of his fingers, casual, almost dismissive. I'm sure she's handled her share of local matters, he said flatly. But let's be honest. There's a big difference between individual-level litigation and the kinds of cases that shape constitutional law in this country. One is practice. The other is scholarship. This time, Jasmine spoke. Her voice was soft, measured, but every word landed. Professor Dershowitz, when you refer to cases that don't matter enough to be included in law school curricula, what exactly are you referring to? A specific case or just a feeling? Alan let out a short, uneasy laugh. I'm referring to cases that may be important to a single person, but don't set precedent. They don't influence how the courts interpret the Constitution. Those kinds of cases don't usually make it into my classes. Jasmine nodded, calmly. She wrote a short line in the notebook on her lap. Then, without rushing, she looked up and opened her briefcase. All eyes turned to her. The camera zoomed in. Alan looked over, still wearing a faint smile, but it no longer reached his eyes. Professor, she began, voice unwavering, you asked about precedent-setting cases. Let me offer one. Thompson Vole, Dallas Housing Authority. A case, I argued. A case that resulted in changes to federal policy on discriminatory practices in the Section 8 housing program. It was heard before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. She held up a stamped document. It is now cited in housing law courses at 17 law schools, including Harvard. The room began to stir. Phones came out. People started Googling. And quietly, validation began to spread. Jasmine didn't change her tone. "I'm just curious," she added, eyes steady. "Is that case covered in your constitutional law seminar?" Alan didn't respond. And that was all.